Hi guys, today I'm going to show you guys how to apply your collar to your shirts. First thing I've done is ironed my interfacing onto my collar stand and to my collar. And I used black just so that you could see it. Normally I would use white since it's a white fabric, but I want to apply it to the wrong side of the fabric on both the collar and the collar stand. Since I've already got that on the collar and the collar stand, I'm going to go ahead and sew my collar at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. When I get to the corner points, I'm going to decrease my stitch length to a 1 and pivot and keep that decreased stitch length for about an inch. And then increase it back up to a 2. I'll do the same thing on this end, decrease the stitch length, pivot, and then increase it to finish off the collar. The next thing I'm going to do is trim and grade. The reason we decrease these stitch lengths is to hold our stitch after we've trimmed off all of this excess. So we're going to trim pretty close to the edges. Then I trim usually about 3/8 of an inch all the way around the collar. And then if you have a heavy fabric, you definitely want to grade your seams. So the side that has the interfacing, you're going to trim that down to 1/4 of an inch. Especially around those corners, you're going to have to hug the corner pretty tight and trim down a lot of fabric, all that excess fabric around the corner, because you want your points to be really sharp. So this trimming and grading is just reducing the bulk. So you can see I've got one side just slightly longer than the other, and the back side. So that's the interface side. The other side is a little slightly longer. The next thing I'm going to do is push out my points and see if I need to trim anything else. You want to use a pretty sharp pair of scissors for this, but not too sharp that it pokes a hole in your fabric. So once you've got those points nice and sharp, you want to iron those, press those down. Iron open your seam, and then press down the center so there's no overlapping. So now that I've got that nice and pressed, I'm going to top stitch along the edge at 1/4 of an inch. After I've top stitched my collar, the collar piece is ready to be attached to the collar stand. So typically our interface side of our collars and collar stands are going to be the closest thing to our bodies, so that's going to be along our neck. This is going to be attached to the back of the shirt, so we want to place the uninterfaced side of the collar stand to the uninterfaced side of the collar. We're going to do that at right sides together, matching our notches. After I've got those attached, I am going to run a basting stitch along there, so I'm going to decrease my stitch length. Now that I have those two pieces basted together, we're going to attach them to our shirt, along with the other collar stand that has the interfacing on it. We're going to do that by sandwiching them between our shirt. So this part goes to the right side of the fabric, making sure to leave 5/8 of a seam, 5 inch extra for your seam allowance right here on each end. So your collar stand should extend over the fabric by 5/8 of an inch. as I'm attaching this piece to the right side of the shirt, I'm also going to be attaching the other collar stand to the back side of the shirt. And that will be right side of the collar stand to the wrong side of the shirt. Make sure that you also extend this part of the collar stand past 5/8 as well. So it should line up with your other collar stand piece with your shirt sandwiched in between. So now you can see I have my collar stand pinned to both sides of the fabric. So I've got the inside of my shirt with the collar stand and the outside of my shirt with the collar stand and the collar. And now I'm going to stitch along here at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So now I have my collar stand sewn to the front and the back of the shirt. Now here comes the tricky part. We've got to tuck in the collar of the shirt, kind of roll it up, as well as the inside of the shirt. This means the left side and the right side of the front of the bodice of the shirt. It's all going to get enclosed inside of this collar stand. So it's a lot of fabric to be shoved inside this collar stand. So you have to be very careful to make sure that you're not stitching any of the collar or the shirt inside of your collar stand. So now that I have everything pinned inside of the collar stand, I'm going to run a stitch along here, along the collar stand, and I'm only going to about 3/8 of the way to the center back of the collar stand. So I was only able to sew 3/8 of the collar because there's so much bulk. By the time you get less than halfway there, you've got to stop because you wouldn't be able to sew the entire collar all the way down. So once you've gotten to this point and you've sewn your edges, you want to trim and grade along where you've attached the collar stand here and along the top where the collar goes. So once again, you're just going to trim everything down to 3/8. Along this curve, you're going to cut your pies. So it's not just a notch, you're actually cutting out a full triangle instead of just clipping it. So like that, you're going to do that all the way around the edge after you've trimmed this side and this side. Now that I've trimmed everything and notched it, I can turn it inside out. Make sure that you trim everything before you turn it inside out, because if you don't, it's pretty much impossible to tuck everything back up in there and try and resew it. Okay, so now I have my nice rounded corner that I can go ahead and press and pull everything out. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to tuck everything inside of here, the shirt and the collar. And pin that up to about 3/8. So you will there will be a hole of about 3 inches where you can turn everything inside out, and you'll hand stitch that closed. But for right now, I'm going to sew along here with a 5/8 inch seam allowance at my collar stand, and then I'm going to trim and grade on this side of the collar and this side of the collar stand. Make sure that you trim well along this edge because you want a nice sharp corner where you meet the button placket, and then you can turn it all inside out. Alright, so here's that 3-inch hole that I was talking about at the top of the collar stand. Everything else should be nice and enclosed and finished inside of the collar. So to finish out this, you can either hand sew it closed or you can pin it and just stitch in the ditch from the back side and the front. So after you've got that hole closed up, the last thing you want to do is run your top stitching along the top of the collar stand. You can also do it along the bottom if you'd like. I'm just going to go ahead and do the top right here at a 1/4 inch. And I'm matching it up where my button placket starts at a 1/4 inch here and a 1/4 inch here. is your collar, the inside of the shirt and the out. As always, if you have any questions, send me an email, yellowbirdfabrics@gmail.com. Thanks so much. Good luck.